Green Gorilla Beat. Content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you. What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and of course, you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, with no chases. And you know, before I get things started, I gotta give a shout out to all the gorillas in the mist. I want to give a shout out to Mark Swift, Show Me, Black Dog, Odd Collard, The Face, Craig, Raphael Brown, Omni Americana, Deanne, Donald Watts, Barry Little, Ryan Jackson, hiphop.catv, Coach DC, The Remedy, Kashif Caldwell, Infamous Chillin', I Am Black Man, John Reads Too Much, Nichita, True King 337, Be Hillfire, Force Windu, may you rest in heaven, my brother. Mr. Blue Collar, Barnolas, Kyle J. Sura, I'm Just Jules, The Book of Ronin, Ab Media 83, Damon Harris, Brian McMurray, Mr. Lou Meth, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, Shop Talk Live, Mr. Heat, Afro Analyst, NEU, Ronan Martin, Isa Abdul Zahir, Sir Anthony, Deshaun Nolly, MLR, Charles Rogers, Universal 178, Blacksword 404, Rashid Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, See Truth the Revelator, Gold Professor, The Nameless Protagonist, Black Pill Ned Stark, Author Unknown, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Brian Williams, Kalon Jakala, Sherrod Martin, Ricky Dawson, Cedric Bowman, True 7360, BK Born Shahid, James Washington, Hostile Adept, Seventh Coast Dojo, WPR1, Roguish the Billmonger, I Care, BGS Ivmore, Marvin Battle Jr., Kwaku 217, S. Haywood, Dragon 59, Supreme Ivmore, Adrian Hicks, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi, NEU, Momal, William Ruffin, and Asangwa. Thank you all for being members of the Green Gorilla channel and helping me to keep the channel going. I appreciate all your help and support. You deserve a round of applause. Thank you so much for all your help and your support over the past 10 months. I appreciate that. We still going. We still here, baby. We still up in this joint. So thank y'all for helping me keep this thing going. Appreciate that. Straight up. For real. And if you would like to inquire about how to be a member of the Green Gorilla channel, well, here's how. What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely. Straight up, no chaser. Today, I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless. All right, man, we back. And you know what we came here to do today? We came here to talk about the subject of selfishness and whether or not people are just downright self-interested. They're selfish. That's just what they are. And I know, there are various people who have the viewpoint that, yes, that is the case. But we're going to explore it philosophically for a minute. It's not going to be titillating and exciting. I'm not going to be going off on ladies, and I might fuss and cuss a little bit, but I always do that. Thank you, Rais Muajid. I ain't seen you in a month of Sundays, bruh. What's good with you, Rais, man? So I want to give a shout out to everybody out there. Mr. Heat, what's good with you? Sir Anthony, what's good with you? Louis Kanya, what's good with you? Keep it 100, man. You got to get on with me, bruh. Rais, you got to get on with me again, bruh. Shout out to High Scholar, man. Shout out to all y'all out there in the chat, man. We here, man. What's good with you, brother? It was a pleasure to talk to you yesterday, man. Or last night. Shout out to all y'all, man. But I think that going over ethical theory would be useful for the men in this space. And I offer it up to you freely, man. If you want to make a donation, you can. If you don't have to. But I think it would prove useful for us in this space to have an understanding of what psychological egoism is. And one of the proponents of ethical egoism, which is different from psychological egoism, and we'll explore why. We will But, she's a proponent of ethical egoism, Ayn Rand. Okay? And a lot of people like Ayn Rand in this space. And I don't have anything against Ayn Rand all the way through and through. I don't think that she's correct. But, hey. But anyway, man, without further ado, let's just get to the proceedings this evening, man, and get this knocked out of the park so I can go eat my spaghetti and garlic bread, which I cooked to perfection. You feel me? So anyway, man, let's get this underway, man. Before I do that, though, I want to make sure that my scene where I'm going to present from is exactly where it needs to be. Then we can get this thing going. Going. Just got a little movements to make. When I get it where I need to get it, we gonna get it. Almost there, man. Almost there. Bear with your boy. All right. So let's get it, man. All right, the music is going to cut abruptly. So ultimately today, what we're going to have a conversation about is me or you, myself or other people. So we're going to investigate the question that centers around egoism. Now, yesterday I made a distinction between two theories, cultural relativism and ethical relativism. And I explained how cultural relativism was descriptive. It's a descriptive theory. It describes how things are, or it's a statement about what is. Whereas ethical relativism is a statement that carries normative obligations, oughts, shoulds, and musts. Okay? The same pertains to the subject matter of psychological egoism and ethical egoism, respectively. So psychological egoism is a descriptive theory, whereas ethical egoism is a normative theory. Then we'll talk about the concept of consequentialism very briefly. And then we'll discuss altruism and reciprocal altruism. So let's just embark on this journey. All right? Now, if you don't know, after the day you can say with a degree of certitude that you do know, this psychological egoism is a descriptive theory that basically says that people behave selfishly. That's what they do. Or at least that people act out of self-interest. Now, I'm asking you, give me an example of somebody who's behaving unselfishly. And I'm going to wait for a little second to see if you got any rejoinders or retorts. Name for me an instance in which people are not behaving or acting selfishly. If you can do that, I would greatly appreciate it. So I'm going to look at the chat right now and see if you can give me an example of someone who's acting unselfishly. I'm going to wait for a quick second. I'm going to give the awkward pause. And I'm going to hit my vape stick. I just need 2 or 3 examples. Just 2 or 3. If you would indulge me, please. Name for me somebody that's doing something that's selfless, that's acting out of concern for others. There's a little bit of delay here. Anybody? Somebody behaving unselfishly. Mother Teresa. Honest charity funds, programs for children. Okay. Kareem Belt, man, I didn't ask you to answer the question. I just asked you, and thank you for chiming in, but I didn't ask you to answer the question. But yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Mother Teresa appears to be a woman who is behaving selflessly. But one can argue that she's doing that in order to gain brownie points so that she can enter into heaven. The same with Gandhi. Gandhi was doing what he was doing in terms of sacrificial work and nonviolent protest in order to achieve a political aim or an objective. Omni Americana says producing a documentary for black men. Well, that just so happens to be in my self-interest as a black man. Malcolm X. Well, Malcolm X was trying to gather the black folks together and band them around an ethical and a religious ideal, but I wouldn't say it was exactly selfless. He wanted to gain reputation and esteem within the nation and achieve brotherhood. But anyway, you know, like Cat Scratch Coder says, Gandhi was acting selfishly on behalf of his caste. But I mean, look, you can talk to me about a guy sacrificing his life in war, and then I'll say something like, because you know, you see the movies where the guy throws his body on the grenade, thereby exposing himself to harm, but he does it in a sacrificial gesture to save that of his teammates or his squadron or his platoon. But one could argue he did that for the sake of honor or some other selfish motive. But the problem with it is that if you try to explain a selfless act, it's almost impossible for you to be able to assert that it's actually selfish, because one can always come up with or fabricate an ulterior motive for that person having behaved what appears to be selflessly or unselfishly. Okay? So that's the point I'm trying to make. Anything you say to selfless, I can retort or I can rejoin with a selfish motive behind their actions. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do briefly is tell you a little story about the ring of Gyges. Now, I've done this before, but I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to explain the significance of stories like this. There are many like this in our culture, okay? Where somebody is granted power. And instead of doing something that's selfless, they do something that's selfish. So let's just go back in time. And the reason I had a video that I could show if I wasn't on warning status from YouTube and they were threatening to ban me for a week. So I can't show the videos that I want to show, so I have to show you mine own. So let's take a trip back down memory lane and watch an old GG exclusive. Peep it out. So I want to talk to you about Plato's Republic. In particular, I want to talk to you about Book 2 of Plato's Republic, where Socrates, who is the major interlocutor of the dialogue, Plato's Republic, or the book, whatever you want to call it, right? He's the major interlocutor, and Socrates is trying to show that being just is intrinsically valuable, that there's something good in and of itself in being good and upright and just as a person. But Glaucon, another interlocutor in this book, in this dialogue called Plato's Republic, argues that there is no intrinsic reason to be just. And that the only reason that people actually are just is that they're trying to avoid the consequences of their unjust actions. And he also, Glaucon, says that there's something anthropological that underpins his perspective, namely a theory that is quite common in ethics. It's called psychological egoism. Basically, psychological egoism says that people, by and large, are naturally selfish. They're naturally egoistic. They look out for number one first. They're selfishly motivated. That's it, right? So according to Glaucon, people are naturally selfish. They're going to be unjust. This is just how it is. And he says, let me tell you why. And he does so by means of a story. The story is called The Ring of Gyges. So according to this story, Gyges, who is a young shepherd and is in service to a king in the kingdom of Lydia. So one day he's out tending his flock when a storm occurs. And next to where he was tending his sheep, there was an earthquake, which basically opens up some chasm in the ground. So, being inquisitive, Gyges basically goes down into this chasm where he sees, amongst other things, a bronze horse with doors on it. So he opens the doors. And when he does, he sees a skeleton of human form with a ring on its finger. And Gyges thinks to himself, damn, what a come up. Let me get that. So he takes the ring and puts it on his finger. And then he leaves, of course, the chasm. Now one day, about a month or so later, while tending his sheep, he notices that if he twists this ring on his finger, it gives him the power of invisibility. And that when he twists it, he could notice people saying slick shit about him that they normally wouldn't say in his presence. Now he's able to see or to actually hear what people really think about him. Damn. What kind of power would that grant you? To be able to hear what people actually think about you? Because people don't always say openly what they actually think about you. They like to sugarcoat bullshit. Although they'll tell you, I keep it 100, dog, all times. Yeah. So anyway, Gyges, basically knowing that this newfound power puts him at an advantage over other people, arranges so that he can become a messenger to the king. So once in the court, he uses this ring to gain the graces of the queen. He seduces her. And he then conspires with the queen to kill the king and to take over the kingdom, and does it. Now, Gyges then uses this story and he says to Socrates that any man who had a similar power would do the same thing. If he could get away with committing crimes without suffering the consequences, he would do it. And that the only reason that people don't do things that are unjust and commit crimes is because they're afraid of getting caught. Remove the power of getting caught and you remove the blockage, the hindrance from people doing things that are unjust. So the only reason you are just is because you don't have a magical ring. And that you would suffer the negative consequences of doing things that are unjust. So the only reason you're actually just is because it's in your interest to be just. Because you'll suffer negative consequences. Remove the negative consequences, you'll do all kinds of foul shit. All right, man, we back, man. That's a flashback from the past, man. So that's a video I did, I don't know how many months ago, but I did it. And there's several reasons why, as a theory, psychological egoism is attractive to people. Now, the first reason is because it seems to appeal to honesty about what people do and the motivations that people have and the reasons, the springs of their actions. You know, it seems like it's an appeal to honesty. Okay. Also, it's attractive to people because it enables them to issue what's called revisionist cynicism. Like, for example, people will look back at figures like Gandhi or MLK or Malcolm X or any other people who's considered to be a service oriented or a sacrificial individual, they'll look at that person and say, they weren't really all that good. They were doing it for selfish reasons. They had selfish motivations that lied behind their actions. So therefore, we don't have to honor them in the way that we do, or the way most people do. So it allows for that. Okay. And then I think the single most attractive reason why people are drawn in to psychological egoism is because it's an easy way to avoid looking out for other people, especially people who are less well off than you are. So those are the typical reasons why, this theory draws people in. Okay. Now, before going on, well, let me just get to it, man. Now, there are three major problems with psychological ego. The first drawback to it is that you can't falsify it. And the second problem with it is that it's doing, what we want, always grounded in selfishness. Does selfishness have to draw out the negative connotations that it has, right? And it's what we do, everything that we do, right? Or what we want, is it always selfish? Like, for instance, I want a documentary to get made. Is that selfish in and of itself? Is it a negative thing in and of itself for me to want to be able to do that? And then also, there's a problem with language, and we're going to explore those, okay? Now, the first problem with it is that you can't falsify it. However, I don't know, like I kind of stopped doing the videos on the philosophy of science because they got less than like 400 or 500 views. So I was like, fuck it, man, I'm not gonna spend all my energy and effort doing that. So I got selfish. But I didn't think people found it useful, so I stopped. But at any rate, any good theory, especially a theory that's grounded in science, is going to allow the room for revision and for scrutiny. The very point at which your theory does not allow for or permit for any kind of examples to the contrary, or for any kind of revision, then one could argue it's not a viable scientific theory. Okay? It's not really doing any scientific work. So that's a problem. Okay? And the individual who came up with the concept of falsification is a philosophy of science professor by the name of Karl Popper, right? And he just says what I already said. Like, if a theory is not falsifiable, it's not viable. It can't be subjected to critical inquiry at all. And the difference between science and, say, for example, psychological egoism is that any scientific theory has to, if it's a good theory, is going to have to allow room for constant reconstruction. Okay? So that's a problem. All right? Another problem is doing what we want always selfish? And to explain this, I'm drawing your attention to a story that Abraham Lincoln told to one of his friends while they were riding around in a stagecoach. The story he tells about a friend of his who was riding around with him in a stagecoach. So they were riding around and, having conversations, doing what presidents and their associates do. And they came across, and it was raining outside, and they came across this big mud puddle. And there were pigs there. And there was a mother pig, and her little piglets were drowning in this mud hole. And Abe Lincoln gets out and saves the piglets and gets himself all muddy and dirty and gets back into the stagecoach. And the friend looks at him and says, well, there you go. You just did something that was selfless. You did something that was not selfish. And then Abe looks at him and says, I did it because if I didn't do it, I would have felt guilty all afternoon. So that's why I went down there and I did it. Okay? So this is another confirmation, one could argue, of the fact that people actually do behave selfishly when it's all said and done. Okay? But come on, man. Like, is everything that we do, even if it's in our interest or it's something that we want or to kind of placate our guilty consciousness, or not consciousness, but conscious, is it really selfish deep down? Really? All right. Now, another problem with psychological egoism is the problem with words. Okay. Now, this is a little heady, but one of the problems with words is what's known as the fallacy of the suppressed correlative. Okay. Now, what is this? It's an argument that essentially says that if you try to redefine a correlative, and a correlative is basically one of two mutually exclusive options. That's what a correlative is, okay? If you try to redefine one of those correlatives so that one alternative basically encompasses the other, you have made the other alternative impossible. So imagine the form of an argument, and it's purely formal in this instance, right? Someone says, okay, all things are either X or they're not X. And then you got another person who comes along and says, well, I don't want to define it that way. I want to define X such that all the things that you say are not X are included in X. You have then thereby committed the fallacy of the suppressed correlative. Now, what's an example of this? And, you know, I don't expect for you to get that. You might have to rewind it a few times to actually understand it. Maybe some of you get it right off the bat, but imagine, and this is an example, and not the best example, but it is an example, and I'm going to use it and move on. So imagine someone says, things are either mysterious or they're not. And they then make the assertion, exactly when an earthquake will strike is a mystery. It's still one. We don't know when they'll happen. But we do know how the blood circulates in the body. So that's not mysterious. And then you get another person that comes along and says, everything is mysterious. There are still things that we don't know about how blood circulates in the human body. What they've done therein is they've committed the fallacy of the suppressed correlative. They make everything mysterious by default, okay? And they exclude the X or not X form. And one could argue that's just bad reasoning. You can't do that, okay? Now, another problem with words associated with psychological egoism is the problem with inventing words. Like, for example, if I talk to you about hot, how do you understand what hot is if you don't understand what cold is? Or if I were to explain to you what up was, you would also have to have an understanding and a knowledge of what down was. If I tell you that something is soft, you have to understand that there are some things that are hard. Well, in order for you to understand the concept, one could argue, of selfishness, then you also have to be able to understand the concept of unselfishness and be able to see it and identify it in people's behavior. So, one could argue, you can't even comprehend what selfishness is without understanding and being able to acknowledge and recognize unselfishness. You just can't do it. Okay? So that's an argument, and that's about the short and tall of that. All right. So what's the bottom line criticism of psychological egoism? Well, either it's true or it's not true. Most people say, okay, well, it's not true. Not everyone is selfish to the bone. Or it's just absolutely uninteresting because everyone is a little bit selfish to some degree. All right? So either it's not true, not everyone is selfish to the bone, or not everyone is completely selfless, or everyone is a little bit selfish. Bottom line. So, in other words, the theory it makes itself to be more important than what it actually is, or the people who adhere to it make it to be more important than what it actually is. They're not saying much. One could argue. Okay, now this is the way that this is usually taught in an ethics course. All right. So I'm giving it to you so you can go back and draw upon it when you use it in arguments. Now, I'm not here to tell you one way or the other what to think or what to believe. I'm just presenting the information to you so at least you understand its strengths and its weaknesses. All right. But I'm not done. All right. So there is a philosopher and a geneticist, a theorist, and his name is Richard Dawkins. All right. And he basically says that it's not people who are selfish, it's our genes that are selfish, right? And you can see animals and human beings doing things that appear to be unselfish, but it's really just their genes carrying out functions unbeknownst to the consciousness of the people who the genes are occupying at a specific point in time, right? So basically, the selfish gene explains why some animals and humans behave altruistically, and that's to promote the survival of their genes, even in cases when people are mistaken about the genetic consequences. So, in other words, what he's saying is that altruism is a biological means for preserving the human species or any other species for that matter. So this is why altruism exists, because the genes are trying to preserve themselves, even in the case where that baby ain't yours, nigga. Damn, that's fucked up, man. But hey, it be like that sometimes. It be like that sometimes. But anyway, moving forward. Now there's some critiques of this viewpoint, okay? I would have showed you the clip, but I'm on a strike, so I'm not gonna show you the clip. Now, there's this woman named Mary Midgley. She's a philosopher. She comes along and she criticizes Dawkins. Okay. And she says, look, if we are altruistic, and I don't know if you know what the word altruism means, but it means being selfless. It's the opposite of selfishness. So altruism is doing things for other people. Okay. Looking out for others beyond yourself. So I forgot to do that. All right. So that's what altruism is. And she says, look, our altruism doesn't lie in our genes or because of some, selfish gene, but is rooted in our experience, especially the experiences we have with our family. Because the people who raise us, if they're good people, they care for us and they love us and they protect us. And they extend empathy to us, we extend it to them, and we help our family whenever we can because they've helped us when we were going through rough patches and so on and so forth, or when we're hurt or when we're experiencing harm. So she says when we perform altruistic actions towards strangers, it's because we've made a choice to somehow make them honorary family members at that time. It's not a mistaken impulse to preserve our genes. So she says that Dawkins is wrong. Okay. Now, Ethical egoism is different than psychological egoism, because psychological egoism just describes how people are. It says that something is, but ethical egoism is a whole different animal in and of itself. Ethical egoism is a normative theory that says you ought to behave in such a way that you carry out your self-interest. You ought to be selfish. That's a whole different subject, man, a whole different issue altogether. So, what do y'all think? Should people just behave according to what's just best for them and fuck everybody else? To hell with everybody else. I'm just going to look out for me. I, me, mine. That's how we supposed to behave? That's how we're supposed to act? I want to know what your prima facie or your first glance thoughts about this are. Because I remember, Method Man and Biggie Smalls, fuck the world. Don't ask me for shit. Everything you get, you got to work hard for it. Honey, shake your tits, shit don't stop. Like, what are you supposed to do, man? Should you say fuck everybody else? It's just me. I don't care if it doesn't benefit me directly. I don't want to have shit to do with it. Is that how we're supposed to behave? That's how we're supposed to act? I want to know what you think about it. And I'm not going to give any evaluation one way or another. Or Tupac. I got to get mine. You got to get yours. I got to get mine. You got to get yours. Didn't he make that song with Richie Rich a long time ago? You got to get yours. I got to get mine. So this egoistic thing is not something that's just the province of people who are wealthy or, people who are from a different racial demographic. We do the same shit. We think the same way. Just so you know. But at any rate, carrying on. And like I said, this is not titillating, but this is informative. Okay. So ethical egoism says we should be selfish. We should look out for our self-interest. So this brings us to the silver rule. I don't know if you've ever heard of the silver rule, but I'm damn sure that you've heard of the golden rule. Now, the golden rule says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's what the golden rule is. But the silver rule basically is a version of the golden rule, but the emphasis is on you. It's on oneself. And ultimately, the golden rule asserts that what you don't like done to you, don't you do it to other people. If you don't want it done to you, you don't do it. Makes sense, doesn't it? To some degree. But anyway, the emphasis behind the silver rule is not altruism per se or in and of itself, but it's based on prudence. It's based on what is in your self-interest, especially over an iterated series of interactions with different kinds of people. If you don't, like I can tell you right now, you can fuck some people over in your business dealings, but if you continue to fuck people over in your business dealings, then guess what's going to end up happening to your reputation? Soon you're not going to be able to do business with anybody because everybody's going to know that when they fuck with you, you're going to fucking do something that's unsavory or dishonest or disreputable. So ultimately, it doesn't work for your own interests to just be selfish to begin with. Maybe. This brings us to the subject matter of Ayn Rand. Okay? And her assertion of the virtue that comes along with being selfish. Okay? You're going to see a series of connections come up on the screen owing to, I guess, new members, old memberships being renewed. So I apologize for the distraction. But what she says is, and she's an ethical egoist, people have a right. No. People have a duty to look after themselves and to seek their own happiness. Now, this should fit right into black men in this space. It should. Because one of the things that's said over and over again is that, okay, well, not here, but elsewhere in the culture that we live in at large, that it's men's duty to protect women. Is it? I mean, is it men's duty to protect women, especially women that they don't know? Is it? So these issues, man, they will come up. All I'm trying to do is give you the formal adumbration of what these theories are, and then you can apply them at some other time. Right now, I'm dealing with the abstract, so it's not going to be something that's exciting and titillating where you can grab your popcorn and see me clown. It's abstract, okay? So, you know Ayn Rand from her work. She wrote several books that are, for the most part, very popular. One of the books that she wrote was The Fountainhead, and that was her first success. Now, I don't know if you know, but The Fountainhead was written in the middle of the 20th century, and it's a romantic novel, a philosophical / romance novel. And she wrote it over like about 7 years, and it centers around this young architect named Howard Roark, and he was struggling against what Rand defined as second-handers, people who attempt to live through others and who place others above themselves. Of course, Howard Roark refused to be a second-hander and to live through others and into placing others above himself. Right? So anyway, man, that was the first successful work that she had. Now, unbeknownst to many of you, Ayn Rand had success in the motion picture industry. I mean, she wrote screenplays and a whole bunch of stuff. She did work in Hollywood. Okay, but the second work that was successful from Ayn Rand was Atlas Shrugged, and that is where she put forth her theory called objectivism. Now, I'm not going to get into objectivism in any depth or detail, but I can tell you that Atlas Shrugged is about it's about a dystopian US. So in which most of the people who are industry insiders and scientists and artists, they basically respond negatively towards the welfare state and basically the government by going on strike. So they refuse to do any work anymore because the government is kind of like chiseling and free riding on their productivity. So what they end up doing is they go and retreat to some hideaway in the mountains, and they build an independent, free economy. Okay, and the hero of that work is an individual by the name of John Galt, and John Galt, within the context of this novel, describes the strike as stopping the motor of the world, because the motor of the world are people who actually get things done, these bigger than life characters who are uncompromising in doing what they want, in achieving what they want, how they want, according to the dictates of ethical egoism. Okay? So when they withdraw from society at large, the nation feels the sting. Okay? And what Rand is basically trying to illustrate here is that without the efforts and the contributions of people who are rational and productive, the economy would collapse and just fall apart. It would fall to pieces. So the novel's part romance, part mystery, part science fiction, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But it tries to mete out her theory of objectivism. And of course, Galt is the person who is the character who illustrates or demonstrates what objectivism is. And look, like I said, I'm not going to go into objectivism in any length at all, but the main tenets of it are that reality exists apart from your consciousness. And human beings are able to have direct contact with reality through their senses. Okay, there's no intuition. Your senses tell you what reality is. Okay, and you can get objective knowledge from perception through the process of concept formation and inductive logic. Now, I don't know if you know what inductive versus deductive logic is. I'm not going to get into all of that here, but just know this. Deductive logic is a form of argument in which the conclusion follows directly from the premises. So here's an example of a deductive argument. Green gorilla is a bachelor. A bachelor is an unmarried male. Therefore, green gorilla is an unmarried male. That's a deductive argument because the premises flow naturally. The conclusion flows naturally from the premises. All right. But an inductive argument is one in which the premise doesn't necessarily lead to the conclusion. For example, the sun has risen throughout the entirety of human existence. Therefore, tomorrow the sun will rise. Now, it's an inductive argument, and one could argue it's a good argument, but it isn't necessary that the sun rise tomorrow. It doesn't have to be the case that happens. This motherfucker could blow up in a supernova, or some great-ass cataclysmic event could occur in the universe that would render that statement false. Highly unlikely, but it is possible. All right, so that's the difference between deduction and induction. But anyway, she basically says that the moral purpose of your life is the pursuit of your own happiness. And that the only social system that is consistent with that kind of morality is the one that basically expresses or displays full respect for individual rights, which are embodied in laissez-faire capitalism. So that's the extent of what objectivism is in relation to how I'm going to explain it tonight. But that's her theory. So she's an ethical egoist, and she asserts that people ought to behave selfishly. All right? You shouldn't look out for other people. You should look out for yourself. Your own happiness should be that very thing that you promote and that you seek towards. Okay? Or that you're reaching towards. Now, there are some criticisms of Ayn Rand and her idea of objectivism and her blind devotion to capitalism. All right, I would have shown the video to kind of explain this, but I can't do it because I'm on a copyright strike or some community strike bullshit. So I ain't gonna do it. But anyway, some people say that her objectivism is a blind defense of capitalism, and a rather vulgar form of capitalism at that, in which people mind their own business and they never interfere in or give other people help. Right? Now, some people say this just creates a worse world in which people are all clamoring and jockeying and, trying to control and dominate one another. Right? And one could argue if that's the kind of culture in which we find, happiness, well, that's a weak form of happiness, right? Where everybody's at odds with each other. And one could argue there's no more difference between this state where everyone's clamoring for dominance and control. It's no different than the state of nature, the way it's explained by John Locke, Thomas Hobbes. Well, Rousseau has a different idea about the kind of experiences people have in the state of nature. But Thomas Hobbes' form of the state of nature is one where he says it's nasty, brutish, and short. If everybody's at odds or competing with one another, then what? And we're not talking about a game. We're talking about real life too. Okay, is that the kind of world that you want to live in? And then also, some people say that she commits the fallacy of bifurcation, which is she creates an either-or situation. So if you help other people, it doesn't mean that you're going to be hopelessly exploited by those people and used, right? If you look out for your own interests at all times. If you don't look out for your own interests at all times. And then it doesn't mean that you'll always be successful if you just look out for your interest either, right? So some people say she commits this fallacy of bifurcation, all right? Now here are the shortcomings of ethical egoism in a nutshell according to philosophers, okay? Now Socrates, and that's the reason why I even bring Glaucon and the Ring of Gyges up, because it's a good way to, flesh out the theory of psychological egoism. But according to Socrates, if you're selfish, you can't be a happy person. Because if the only thing you're thinking about is yourself, you're caught up either in your emotions or your appetites. Because typically, when you're selfish, that's what you're thinking about. You're being emotional or you're using your appetites. You don't want somebody to have something because you're envious, or it's because you desire to satiate the lower part of your being. And he's going to argue that justice exists within the individual when he's able to live in a community of other persons where responsibility is shared. Now that's just him, not me, okay? And then the other critique or shortcoming of ethical egoism, according to the philosophical discipline, is that it's not a solver of moral conflicts. If you are at odds with somebody else and the selfish interest is the only thing you're looking out for, like, how is it that you form partnerships with people that are mutually advantageous? How do you even see that there's mutual advantage in cooperating in the first place? Or do you get into cooperative situations only to use and manipulate other people? One could argue that's fucked up. And we got words for that. Like, we call you a fuck nigga. That nigga used me, man. And we say the same thing about women. Right? Also, one could argue that ethical egoism really only works if you advocate altruism, but you actually are pursuing egoism. Meaning that you really can't get this kind of thing off, this ethical egoistic aspiration off, without actually fainting as if you're being altruistic, or unless you're advocating that. Otherwise, people are not gonna fuck with you. If they know that every time that you come to the club or to the bar, only thing you're gonna do is worry about your own pockets and shit. You ain't gonna never buy a beer for a round of brews for the guys. You're just gonna look after your own self-interest. People will stop fucking with you. I will. All right. Also, some people say ethical egoism ought to be, critiqued insofar as it's insensitive to people when they're going through suffering. So, like you see some, body panhandling on the street, fuck that dude, man. Like, is that how you feel when you see these guys? Like, some people are shamming and scamming while they do this, but like, clearly not everyone is scamming and shamming. So if people are going through a struggle, what's your response? Oh man, fuck that shit, dude. You got to get your own. I got to get mine. You got to get yours. Fuck that broke ass nigga. That's how you feel? I mean, it's just a thought, right? So anyway, that's the shortcomings. And this brings us, I'm about to round this up, man, and bring it home. So there's a philosopher, a continental philosopher, by the name of Emmanuel Levinas. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. This motherfucker shit is difficult to read. It's almost impenetrable. All right. But he came up with the concept of ideal altruism. And what he says is that everybody ought to give up his self-interest for the sake of others. Everyone ought to do that. I think he's going a little too far here, but okay, well. Everybody ought to give up their self-interest for the sake of other people. And what he says is that you're already primed to do this. And the reason that you are, but there's a difference between ideal altruism, where you just give everything up, and reciprocal altruism. Now, reciprocal altruism says, look, I'm going to place your interest ahead of mine in an emergency. But motherfucker, when I'm in an emergency, I expect for you to do the same thing for me. It ain't, I'm just helping you, and then when I get into a rut, you're like, okay, fuck it, like I'm not available. No, if I scratch your back, you scratch mine. If I help you through a jam, you help me through a jam. One could argue that's what manhood is predicated upon. But hey, I don't know, you be the judge. You make the call. Another altruist thinker is the famous bioethicist Peter Singer. And he basically is an antagonist against ethical egoism, right? He says, look, people shouldn't be selfish, right? And he comes up with a modified version of the prisoner's dilemma. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of what the prisoner's dilemma is, but I'll explain it to you. It's really not that difficult to understand, especially if you've been in a jam before, okay? I had a video to show it, but can't show the goddamn video, so I have to explain it myself. All right. So imagine you just got arrested and you motherfuckers is guilty. All y'all guilty. There's two of you, but you're guilty. All right? And they take you to the back and they try to get you to fucking snitch. All right? That's what they do. This is what the police do now. Don't say they don't, because that's what the fuck they do. All right? So they try to get you to snitch on each other. Now, of course, if you're in this kind of situation, you have two choices. Either you confess, tell it all, or you lie. That's all you got. However, given the fact that there are two people, there are 4 outcomes that can ensue from this altogether, right? But let's just look at the matrix. Okay, so if both people confess, both prisoners, if they both confess, they get 8 years' time. If they both lie, they get 1 year. But if one confesses and the other lies, the person who confesses doesn't get any time. That's called ratting on your partner. Now, of course, the person who is in the cell or who's in the interrogation room being given this offer or whatever the case may be, he knows what you know. They know exactly what you know and the outcomes. They know that if you both lie, that you'll get a year, both of you. But they also know that if you both confess, you'll get 8 years. However, they both know that if one of them lies and the other confesses, the one that lies is going to get more time and the one that confesses is not going to get any time at all. So here's a situation in which doing exactly what is in your best interest or the best outcome for you, given your interest, is not the one that you should pick. So here's a situation in which doing what is in your self-interest can actually lead to you suffering a suboptimal outcome. Because typically, if you know that the other person could and will confess, you'll confess also. That's the way it goes. Now, you could put a different scenario in this, like thermonuclear global war. Global thermonuclear war is also a prisoner's dilemma. The best situation is one in which you push the button on the nukes and blow up the other country, and the other country doesn't do it. Now, the best outcome after that is that neither one of you blow each other up. But knowing that the other one might push the button because that's the best outcome for him is to push it, you'll push the button too. So that's why they say that like a nuclear arms race is like a prisoner's dilemma, or going to war, thermonuclear war is a prisoner's dilemma. All right? So hopefully I explained that enough so you can understand it. If you don't, I'll answer any questions that you got about it in the chat. All right. So that's the classic prisoner's dilemma. But Peter Singer comes up with a modified prisoner's dilemma. And he says, okay, imagine this. You got two hunters and they're attacked by a tiger. Now they both want to get the fuck up out of there. They both want to run. And if they both run, one of them motherfuckers is going to get picked off by that tiger. If one stays and fights and the other runs, the one fighting is going to die. However, if they both stay and fight, they will both survive, because then they can fend it off through tactics and strategy. So what he asserts here is that being selfish is not always optimal. Doing what's in your best interest according to the dictates of reason and logic and game theory doesn't always call for you to be absolutely thoroughly selfish. That's what he's trying to articulate here. All right. And one could argue this is how human beings have been able, over the course of millennia, have been able to fight off the rigors and the strictures of nature. All right. Now, I've looked, there's a great lecturer. His name is Robert Sapolsky. Man, check his videos out, man. That shit is dope as hell. I'm a geek. I'm unapologetically so. Like Dr. Johnson said yesterday, I'm a geek, man. This shit gets me going, man. So he does lectures on evolutionary biology, and he intertwines game theory into it. And he talks about the best kind of mechanisms or strategies that organisms have utilized in all forms of the animal kingdom, human beings all the way down to like cellular life. And for the most part, they use a strategy most organisms do called tit for tat, with a few modifications. But for the most part, forgiving tit for tat is what we do. I'll play nice with you until you defect. And then I'll do one more round if you defect. But if you defect again, I don't play with you anymore. But if you do play nice the next go round after you've defected, then the process of cooperation starts over again. So it's tit for tat. It's called forgiving tit for tat. But anyway, man, if you get the opportunity, look up Robert Sapolsky. The dude's lectures are dynamic, fabulous, and they're free. It's like some Ivy League shit on YouTube. Go check it out. But anyway, there was an interview that this guy had, Peter Singer, on 60 Minutes. Can't show it, but I would have showed it to my class if I had one, but can't show it on YouTube because I don't want to incur a community strike. So anyway, this is where I would eventually get into a conversation about evolutionary biology, and then I would tie it into soft universalism, which is one of the ways to approach moral problem solving that I began to talk about yesterday. When I talked about there's only 4 approaches to ethical dilemmas or moral problem solving. You got one part, which is comprised of 3 subparts: subjectivism, nihilism, and skepticism. Then you got ethical relativism. Then you got soft universalism and hard universalism. Okay. Now, I'm just telling you, I lean more to soft universalism because I'm a naturalist. I believe in studying evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, and anthropology and history to see how humans behave and the optimal kind of behavior that contributes to the most thriving and functioning amongst organisms, in this case, the human organism. All right. But like, we're not that different from primates or other mammals because we have similar nervous systems. All right. Our nervous systems are not that different in the way we perceive, you know, what can I call this? Offenses against us is not that different than how animals perceive offenses against them in nature. All right. And what I do is typically I would show a video of Franz de Waals, and in this video, man, he's got some monkeys and shit. And they start off by giving both of them like cantaloupe or honeydew or some shit like that, right? And they have to perform a basic task. They perform the task, they get the reward. But they change the game up midway, and instead of giving them both the same reward, they continue to give one of the monkeys a cantaloupe, but they give the other one a cucumber. Okay. Now, of course, I don't know, man, like cantaloupe is sweeter and it's more delicious than cucumber. Okay. So the one monkey who's given the cucumber, you know, he at first is like, what? Hold on, wait a minute. He looks at the cucumber, eats it, like, okay, maybe the next time I do this shit, I'll get, you know, some honeydew or cantaloupe or whatever. So he does it again. They both perform the task and they both get the reward, but he gives, you know, the cantaloupe to one monkey and gives the honeydew to the other, and the one that gets the cucumber is like, hold on, wait a minute. No, man. So he throws the cucumber at the tester. I mean, it's the funniest shit in the world. Starts grabbing on the bars and shit. You know, like, fuck this, man. You know, he just gets indignant. They do it again, and the monkey gets indignant as well, right? When he receives the cucumber instead of what his partner is getting. And but human beings perform pretty much in the same kind of way and in the same capacity. You know, if you look at iterated games. But anyway, that's where I was going with it, but I can't actually demonstrate it to you. All I can do is just have an adumbrated conversation with you about it. But the person again who you know, is the architect, like the kind of like the progenitor of soft universalism, is David Hume. And he basically says, look, compassion and benevolence are instinctual. We have it. And men who are the most honored and esteemed typically are going to be those kind of men who are actually benevolent and magnanimous, right? And that's the foundation of our moral value. And I was going to try to connect this to soft universalism and neuroscience by means of a video, but I can't do it. But one could argue that neuroscience gives us some insights into the bedrock of our moral inclinations. All right. So again, all I'm trying to do is show you, Franz de Waal, there's evidence that there is moral behavior even in animals, and indignation, anger related to justice and fairness. They have awareness of these kind of concepts, even though we don't like to attribute it to them. All right. And that's it, man. So that's a lot. I don't know how many people are along with me for the ride because I had to turn it off. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions about this, I'll answer those. But let me take a quick break right quick before I do that. And I'll be right back because I need to swallow some water right fast. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. For some reason I didn't have any audio. Just dumb mistake on my part. But yeah, so thank you, Mr. Heat, for the donation. I appreciate that. If you like the content, please support. It's not a obligatory thing, but you know, if you like the content and you want to see more content like it, please you know, support. And if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer any that you might have. I won't do this for too long, but if you got any questions, please, yeah, please ask, and then I can, you know, get out of here. So I'm gonna wait and see if you got any questions. If you don't, um, it's a donezo. I'll holler at y'all later. But yeah, man, please support the Green Gorilla channel. You feel me? So I'm gonna wait to see if you got any questions, and then move from there. And thank you, Sir Anthony. Uh, I don't know exactly how you spell Robert Sapolsky, or but the person before, yeah, I think somebody, yeah, that's I think Louis Cipher got it right. That's how you spell it. But anyway, I mean, you know, the whole idea is, she says, inherent morality is nothing more than a cellular biology's hedge against self-inflicted genocide. Hmm. You know, to some degree, I can buy into that. You know, if we don't have the ability to cooperate, we perish. Part of the reason why the human species is so successful is because of our proclivity to act in concert and to cooperate. If we weren't able to cooperate and there was nothing that compelled us to do so biologically or innately, we probably would have perished a long time ago. Brian McMurray says, how do we get ADOS FBA from an individualist mindset to more of a collective mindset? And you know, boy, that's the $1,000,000 question. I think you need both, and this is not an either or for me. You know, I look at it again from the situation or from the angle of game theory. I'm like, I'm willing to cooperate with you as long as you're playing nice. You stop playing nice, if it's fuck me, it's fuck you. But how do you get a group of people who've been enculturated into individualism? That's very difficult to do. It's funny though, because, you know, during our work life, we're forced to work in teams. I mean, when we watch sports, you know, the value of teamwork is extolled, especially, you know, related to team sports. But I mean, elsewhere, we have different kinds of mindsets, especially as we engage the market. But the funny thing is, you know, corporations don't work without teamwork. Businesses don't work without teamwork. Isn't that funny? Um, Sir Anthony says, Dr. GG, do you consider Ayn Rand to be a legitimate philosopher? You know, anybody could be a philosopher as far as I'm concerned. She's not held in the highest regard amongst people who do it professionally. Or the biggest name philosophers don't really actually mention her because they don't consider her contributions to be of any sorry, they don't, it's popular philosophy. It's like gutter philosophy to them. It's profane. Like kind of what I'm doing here. It's not serious to these people. Not rigorous enough. That's so these nobody answered Ayn Rand in the professional philosophical community. They just looked at it like this silly woman and moved on. But you have to understand the time in which Ayn Rand was writing. Okay, this is at the height of the Cold War, and she was an anti-communist activist. and she was working in Hollywood to promote that end and those aims. You know, she was involved with the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals Committee. It was a Hollywood anti-communist group, and she wrote articles in behalf of that group. This is before second wave feminism, by the way. So women did do some shit. But yeah, she was also connected to anti-communist, the American Writers Association. So she basically was, I think, in her estimation, performing her civic duty. She was, fighting for America. That's what she thought she was doing. Let me see. Ian Grace. How is this mirrored in our right to have sex with as many chicks as we choose? The modern day female dominated church changed the definition of fornication from sex with prostitutes to unmarried sex. Wow, that's that's a deep one. How do you reconcile, that kind of mating strategy with look, let me just say this, man. I don't know, man. If you're an egoist and you think everybody's selfish, then like how can you stop it? And why would you want to if that's your viewpoint? But should people behave that way? And then should people be required to bail people out who behave that way? It used to be your daddy. If you was fucking somebody's daughter and they got pregnant, motherfucker, you either she getting the hell out going somewhere behind a corner where she ain't gonna be seen, have that baby, or give it up for adoption or something like that, or you gonna marry my daughter. And you're gonna do right by her. And your ass gonna get a job and the whole nine. But nowadays we live in it's a thought culture, bro. It's all women can do whatever the fuck they want to. No repercussions, no inhibitions. It's like shit, having a baby now, without a man around is the norm. It's like the shit to do. It's like, hey, revolutionary. Like, yeah, we're women. We give birth and we fuck who we want when we want. That's the mindset right now. Doesn't have the greatest results, doesn't end in the greatest endpoint, but it's what's done at the current moment. He says the rule of Briffault's law. That's what Nameless Protagonist says. Look, women have a lot of currency with men, because women, they are the gatekeepers of reproduction, unless men control it. But I mean, ultimately, men are still the gatekeepers of reproduction in some sense, because if men don't create the environment or the context in which reproduction is possible, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. But when you remove all threats and everything is safe, like you're free now to roam around the cabin. That's that's what it is now. The safety that women have at the current moment. It's like they don't even have to worry about finances or what they're going to eat and how they're going to eat. If that's not a concern, then sexual mores they don't matter anymore. Louis Cypher says time to start stoning chicks again. That's a cold one right there, Louis. That's a cold one right there. But hey, men are getting stoned in a whole bunch of ways anyway. He says, shout out to automation, AI, genetic engineering, and artificial wombs. The diminishing returns on ethics is going to be so real in the next 50 years. Look, I don't know. Here's my viewpoint on this, nameless. You know, there's subtleties that we can't see, even related to nature itself, bro. And just because you're able to carry out the mechanics of reproduction doesn't mean you're going to be able to carry out the spirit of reproduction. I mean, if wombs become artificial, who the fuck is gonna love those kids, man? Who's gonna have a symbiotic connection to those kids? That's something to think about, man. If children are produced out of vitro, out of utero, by being placed in artificial utero, like the baby's not going to be able to experience the heartbeat of their mother. They're not going to get the hormonal and the chemical connection. We don't know how that shit's going to play out, man. To me, it's absurd that any group of people would ever try to undertake, that project. To me, it's ridiculous, and it's the ultimate slap in the face to nature, and we don't know what the consequences of that will actually be. That shit right there, that gives to me that shit could give birth to the Antichrist, bruh. I mean, I'm not deeply religious, but if there's any Antichrist, that motherfucker will be born out of an artificial womb. Mark my word. Yeah, that's brave new territory. That's some bullshit territory right there. He said there's also the question of epigenetics. What kind of gene expressions are going to end up off? What about this word empathy? It's not being talked about at all from what I can see. Yeah, like there are things going on in relation to being born than than just being able to carry the process through mechanically, biologically mechanically. It's a lot going on there, man. I don't think artificial wombs are going to cut it. I don't think it's going to cut it, man. Ian Gray says exactly. Black men getting stoned to death for having sex. This lesbian feminist California legislature is trying to pass a law to criminalize a man for taking off a condom without the chick's consent. Yeah, he shouldn't have took off the condom though. Look, that's fucked up to me. But he says we should definitely have a discussion about that. About what? But anyway, man, I'm about to sign off, man. It's Friday. It's almost 7:00. All I tried to do is explain to you what psychological egoism is. And I wish we could have a conversation, but I'm not on StreamYard, and so I would have to hook up Zoom, and I just ain't got to it yet. Exactly. A human being is not just the sum of its parts. There are intangibles there and subtleties there that you don't know what the outcome will be. You can fuck around and play with reproduction if you want to. We've done a good job with it thus far. But when you start to create artificial wombs and women feel like reproducing in and of itself is that burdensome, then you're cursing nature. That we are getting to the point where I don't like it. I don't like where we're going. I don't like where we're going. Put it that way. So anyway, man, I'm about to sign off, man. Thank y'all for coming in tonight. I know this is not, I'm not going off on women and talking crazy. That kind of stuff generates a lot of likes and subscribers and members and, creates a lot of donations and stuff like that. But, in the long run, it's not about all this proselytizing and this man talk. It's about, gaining information and learning and understanding and having a command of concepts and being able to utilize them. That's the stuff that matters. Because when it gets to the point where we have debates, we have to be knowledgeable. He says, Brian McMurray says, my uncle says, thank you at Green Gorilla, and I thank you as well. Shout out to you, Brian McMurray, and shout out to your uncle, man. I hope y'all having a pleasant evening. So at any rate, man, I'm about to sign off of here, man. I will holler at y'all Monday, but I'll probably be back in this week if I can twist Marcus Aurelius's arms, keep it 100 to get him to holler. We'll get something going, do a hangout or something like that. So anyway, man, I'll holler at y'all, man. Peace out.